Okay, back again. So you're looking at my daily driver. This is a Australian car brought out in the 50s, early 50s. It did start out its life in England. They brought them over and then assembled them here, similar to the combi that I'm doing up. That's my standard 10. It's virtually the same vehicle, except it was like an upgraded version a few years later. It's got a boot, larger engine, slightly different gearbox system. It had indicators on the side of the vehicle, and it doesn't have the semaphores or trafficators as they called it here. But I've just got it back from the mechanic, and I've been having a lot of dramas with this vehicle. The clutch went when I first got it on the road about 8 months ago, and basically I went down to my local supplier and got some parts, and I told them what it was for, and they assured me that what they were giving me was correct. A bit of a know-it-all type person, and been in the industry forever. They told me it was a direct swap over from another vehicle, and a lot of things do work like that, but this particular clutch pressure plate, clutch plate and washer, carbon thrust washer, thrust bearing, wasn't correct. So you've got a pressure plate which has a certain height, as in this distance to there from the flywheel, and this is a brand new one. And then you've got your clutch plate. Now this one is pretty bad, but it still would have been okay to use. So they talked me into getting a new clutch plate and pressure plate and flywheel machined, and a new carbon thrust washer. So this is the thrust washer, and what it does is clutches have changed over the years, and there's different versions, and so this one basically, if you imagine the motor's this way and it's coming back this way, this sits on a fork that has a rod pushing on it, and that sort of engages and pushes down. Now this is what the original culprit was. There's no, so you can see the oxidization there, so that's steel or iron, and then you've got carbon, and this was the pressure here. So the meat had worn away. So what had happened was it wasn't allowing me to change gears on the driven plates here. So I went in there and I just wanted to buy this, and they supplied me with one, but they also said, oh, I needed to, they looked at this and said, oh, you better just get a whole kit. And this is only a tiny vehicle, it's probably 800cc, it doesn't go more than, I don't drive it any more than 60 kilometers an hour, so I'm not sure what that is in miles, but it's bugger all really. And I don't go into heavy traffic conditions, I drive it in the middle of the night generally. So they supplied me with this, and it's a bit of a drama getting the motor and gearbox out of this vehicle. It's so tight underneath there. There's about an inch between the block and the firewall. Normally, you know, you can sort of just lean the engine back against the firewall, and then you can get in around it and undo the bolts, pull it out. unless you've got a hoist and you take the whole lot out and do it that way. But this is the one they supplied me, and it had another, I don't know, I'm going to say that much more carbon meat on it. So that's how much is worn down in 6 to 8 months. Now this thing should last 15 to 20 years. Well, whatever time it lasts for, but generally it's not something that wears out. So where do I go from there? So I put it in, and I had a lot of dramas with it. I ended up having to pull the gearbox about 3 times, and then finally worked out that the rod that pushes from the clutch slave cylinder, so you've got your clutch pedal, and then that has the master cylinder behind it, and there's a hydraulic line, and then there's the slave cylinder. Now none of this is adjustable, it's all set. There's no adjustment fore and aft. You can't shorten your stroke or pull the slave cylinder out of the gearbox slightly to adjust for any sort of differences in heights, which I thought strange, but apparently that's how it is. This was all set at the factory, and you weren't really supposed to go in there and adjust it all. That being said, when I put all this new gear in, now if you take into account the height of this was more than the original, and I'll just show you, if you look at the height of that, so this is where it sits on the yoke, so it can sort of swivel as it gets pushed in and out, you know, to keep a direct line. So there's just a holder either side, and it sits like that. And then this one as well. Now I didn't pick this up originally, otherwise I would have knew straight away something wasn't right. But if you look at where this sits and this sits, they're in the same plane, but if you look at this section here, it's sitting higher, so the distance from that point to here alone is more than that distance. Well, you can probably see it better this way. I'm just trying to think how I can show you. I'll do it this way. So you can see the differences there. That, say that center pin hole, that's the center hole, right? So that's where you would take your measurement from, there to there, and then you add your distance for the meat for the bearing itself, the washer, and then you measure that to there. It's a lot more. It's probably, you know, 1/4 of an inch in the old scale, or even more. I'm not too sure exactly, but for me that's probably a good 1/2 centimeter, and that's a lot when you're talking about clutches. I'm not an expert. I've really had minimal experience, but anyway, so I installed it. It was the exact same distance this way. Everything looked the same to me out of the box. Like, I had no idea that there could be a difference this way. I don't even know why there would be a difference that way in the casting itself. It's got me stuffed. Everything's the same except the distance from there to there is higher. So you can see that. So anyway, this was what I was supplied, and I ended up having to cut the push rod down about 6 millimeters just to make the clutch work, and it worked. It wasn't perfect, it did its job. So everything combined gave me an extra distance of this far, basically this much. And the clutch crapped out the other day as well, and we're only 6 months in. So I took it to the mechanic, and they said, oh, it's just a thrust washer. Without even pulling the gearbox apart, they knew exactly what it was. And I said, oh, well, it's a new one. And they were a bit perplexed by that, because You know, it's not something that should wear out. So they said to me, oh, you can just go get another one. And I actually had a spare one anyway, so I was going to take it and do it myself, and I thought, you know what, something else is not right here. Otherwise it wouldn't have happened in the first place. So I I paid them to pull the gearbox and have a look at it, and they found the problem. So, you know, I half fixed it in the first place, but definitely that's a bad thing, because this ended up coming out inside the gearbox, or inside the bell housing. And so what they did is they got the old pressure plate, this is the new one, and they reused the old one, which was the correct height, and then they put the new clutch plate in it. So what I've got left now is the new pressure plate and the old clutch plate, and I'll just keep them aside. And I've got this broken thrust and the old one. So it was quite an ordeal, really, and it cost me, you know, all up for a $50. It was only $35, I think, for one of those thrust bearings. I could have got away with just repairing that or replacing that to begin with, and I still would be driving around, because there's no wear and tear on these clutches. They go forever. I mean, yes, it probably would go eventually, but for what I do, I drive it about 6 kilometers and then back again 6 hours later, so I don't take this car on massive journeys. And it would have done me for a fair while longer, but it ended up costing me, as I said, over $1,100 all up for a $30 part, and a lot of heartache too. So anyway, be careful of advice sometimes. Even the dowel pins that fit into the bell housing weren't the correct size. I thought it was very tight trying to get it in there originally, so I think what the mechanics had to do is drill them out, which is not really what you want to be doing on that plate anyway. So anyway, I had no work done on my vehicle today, my Combi, because I had to go and do this. But anyway, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment too. See you next time.